It was the kind of night no one remembers. Cold, quiet, unremarkable. The holidays were winding down. Most people were indoors. Somewhere out there, two boys, David Spencer and Patrick Warren, stepped into the dark. They didn't come back. No one panicked at first. There were no headlines, no search helicopters, no national appeals. Just a couple of kids out late. It didn't seem unusual. But the hours passed, then days, and what started as concern slowly turned into something else. For decades, the disappearance of David and Patrick has haunted a community, baffled investigators, and broken two families. No one has ever been charged. No bodies have ever been found, and no official version of events has ever been confirmed. All that remains is a timeline full of holes, a trail gone cold, and a case that still refuses to rest. Welcome to Bad Things. Join us as we trace the final hours of David Spencer and Patrick Warren and examine what most likely happened. Boxing Day, 1996. In the post-Christmas quiet of Chelmsley Wood, a sprawling working-class estate outside Birmingham, two boys left their homes for what should have been an ordinary evening. David Spencer, 13, and Patrick Warren, 11, were best friends. They had grown up on the same street, played football together, and spent most of their free time roaming the area like local kids often did. That night, they told their families they were heading out to visit Patrick's older brother. It was just after 6 p.m. Earlier that same day, a police officer had spotted the boys near a frozen pond in nearby Meriden Park. He warned them to stay off the ice. The encounter was uneventful and ended with the boys being told to move along. It would later be recognized as one of the final confirmed sightings. As evening fell, the streets of Chelmsley Wood emptied. Shops were shut for the holiday. Lights blinked out behind drawn curtains. Somewhere in those silent hours, the boys vanished. Just after midnight, at around 12:15 a.m. on December 27th, the pair were seen again, this time at a local petrol station. A night attendant remembered them clearly. Two boys joking and chatting, one pushing a red mountain bike. The man gave them a packet of biscuits and watched as they wandered off toward the nearby shopping center. They didn't seem distressed. There was no indication that anything was wrong. That red bicycle, brand new, a Christmas present, was later found abandoned behind the garage near the rubbish bins. By morning, both families knew something was wrong. Neither David nor Patrick had come home. At around 9 a.m. on December 27th, relatives contacted the police to report them missing. The initial response was low-key. Officers told the families it was too early to worry. The boys were likely messing about or staying with friends. No search was launched. No media appeal went out. Police considered the boys streetwise and assumed they would turn up. The lack of urgency became a point of anger and heartbreak for the Spencer and Warren families. From the very beginning, they felt their concerns weren't being taken seriously. The idea the two boys had simply wandered off for a bit of holiday freedom seemed to dominate police thinking in those crucial first days. Officers made public statements reinforcing the assumption. "There is no reason to believe the boys have come to any harm," one said. But as hours became days, that narrative wore thin. The families pushed for more action. Flyers were printed. Calls were made to the press. Despite efforts by relatives, the story failed to gain widespread attention, overshadowed almost immediately by another case that would dominate local headlines. Just a few days after David and Patrick disappeared, 17-year-old Nicola Dixon was found murdered in a churchyard in the suburb of Sutton Coldfield, about 8 miles from Chelmsley Wood. She had been raped and killed while walking home on December 30th. Her case sparked a massive police operation and made national news. Helicopters were deployed, roadblocks set up. The contrast in response between the two cases, one a middle-class teenage girl from an affluent area, the other two boys from a council estate, did not go unnoticed. By early January, the abandoned red bicycle was formally identified as Patrick's. It had taken police over a week to connect the bike found behind the petrol station to the missing boy, despite its distinctive features. For the families, that delay was difficult to accept. It was the first clear sign that something sinister might have happened, something beyond two boys running away. It also cast doubt on the way the case had been handled from the outset. In the following months, police expanded their inquiries but still found no clear leads. There were no confirmed sightings of the boys beyond the petrol station. The park and surrounding areas were searched, including the frozen pond the boys had been warned away from. Nothing was found. Occasionally, tips came in, claims the boys had been seen in various parts of Birmingham, or that they were hiding out with friends, but none could be verified. In April 1997, David and Patrick's faces appeared on milk cartons across the country. The initiative, inspired by similar campaigns in the United States, was led by the National Missing Persons Helpline and marked the first time children had been featured in such a campaign in the UK. The boys were now known as the Milk Carton Kids. For the first time, their disappearance was receiving national attention. Still, no breakthrough came. As the one-year anniversary approached, the families spoke to the media, pleading for information. They described a Christmas marked not by celebration, but by dread. Derek Warren, Patrick's older brother, later said, "Everyone expects to be happy on Christmas Day. I think, what's there really to look forward to? My brother went missing on Boxing Day. I really don't like Christmas." Years passed. Leads dried up. At times, investigators suggested the boys could still be alive somewhere, perhaps sleeping rough. But privately, many officers began to accept that the case was no longer about finding two runaways. It was a missing persons case that had likely crossed a darker line. Yet without any physical evidence, suspects, or witnesses, there was little to move forward with. In 2003, nearly 7 years after the boys vanished, police arrested a 37-year-old man in connection with the case. The arrest followed an anonymous letter claiming that David and Patrick had been killed and buried in Woodgate Valley Country Park, several miles from Chelmsley Wood. The site was searched. Investigators said the letter was credible enough to act on, and the families waited anxiously for news. But after questioning, the man was released without charge. No remains were found. By the 10th anniversary in 2006, police publicly stated they believed they were closer to solving the mystery than ever before. A special appeal aired on BBC's Crime Watch, revisiting the timeline and urging anyone with information to come forward. But the broadcast brought no new solid leads. Behind the scenes, police actively continued, but to the public, the case remained stuck. In the years that followed, glimmers of hope occasionally surfaced. New witnesses, potential sightings, unexplored locations, but nothing that ever led to resolution. The families continued to advocate, and the boys' faces continued to appear in missing persons campaigns. By 2016, on the 20th anniversary of the disappearance, West Midlands Police formally stated that David Spencer and Patrick Warren were now presumed dead. It was a quiet, painful acknowledgement of what most had feared for years. But the investigation remained open. Any new information, they said, would still be pursued. More years passed. Then in 2021, public attention surged again after a television documentary re-examined the case. It raised new questions and prompted community-led efforts to search locations previously ignored. A volunteer dig was launched by one of the boys' family members, drawing national media and support. It, too, ended without answers. As of now, nearly 30 years later, the case remains one of Britain's most haunting missing child investigations. There are no arrests, no confirmed theories, just two boys, a winter night, and a silence that has never broken. With no definitive evidence, no confessions, and no trace of the boys themselves, the disappearance of David Spencer and Patrick Warren has remained open to interpretation, fuel for theories that have evolved over nearly 3 decades. Some were early assumptions by authorities, others emerged from desperate speculation, and a few were built on later investigative developments. What follows are the dominant theories that have shaped public and police thinking over the years. Number 1. They ran away. This was the first and most publicly stated theory, especially in the critical early days. From the moment the boys were reported missing on December 27, 1996, police repeated the idea that David and Patrick had likely chosen to leave home for a few days of freedom. It was Christmas break. They were old enough to know the area, and the suggestion was they might have been sleeping rough or staying with friends. This belief was echoed in early police briefings. There is no reason to believe the boys have come to any harm, one officer told the press. It was a view seemingly rooted in their background. 2 kids from a council estate, viewed as independent and prone to mischief. But this theory quickly lost traction. The boys had left with no extra clothes, no money, and wore jackets unsuitable for a winter night. Most significantly, Patrick's red mountain bike, a prized Christmas gift, was found discarded behind a petrol station shortly after midnight. No young lad would just leave that bike unless something bad happened, one local resident told the press. Even the police eventually stopped promoting the runaway theory, though it had already cost them vital early momentum. Number 2. They suffered an accident. Another line of thought held that David and Patrick might have met with misadventure. Perhaps they ventured back onto the frozen pond in Meriden Park and fell through the ice. They had already been warned away from it by a local bobby earlier that day. Or maybe they explored an abandoned building or construction site and became trapped or injured, their bodies hidden in some overlooked corner. This theory led to multiple searches of Meriden Park, nearby woods, and derelict areas around Chelmsley Wood. Police even dredged the lake. Nothing was found. No clothing, no belongings, no physical signs the boys had died by accident. One darker variation suggested the possibility of a hit and run. In this scenario, a driver, possibly intoxicated, struck the boys on a quiet road and panicked, removing their bodies to avoid prosecution. It's not impossible, but it would have required quick thinking, access to a vehicle large enough to transport 2 children, and no trace left behind. You'd expect something, a former detective later said. Tire marks, blood, disturbed ground. There was nothing, and again, it would not explain the abandoned bike. Number 3. They were abducted and killed by a local offender. As the search dragged on and the case turned cold, another theory began to take shape, that the boys had been abducted by someone known to them or familiar with the area, possibly even lured away under false pretenses. The most widely discussed element of this theory stems from a letter received by police in 2003. The writer claimed that David and Patrick had been murdered and buried in Woodgate Valley Country Park. The letter was anonymous, but police deemed it credible enough to act on. A 37-year-old man was arrested and questioned. The park was searched. For a few days, it felt like the mystery might be on the verge of resolution. But the man was released without charge, and nothing was found. Whether the letter was a hoax or a flawed recollection remains unknown. But it reinforced the idea that someone local, and possibly known to the boys, had harmed them and hidden the evidence effectively. The absence of physical evidence also led some to wonder if the area had been searched too late. If that lead had come in earlier, we might have had something to work with, one retired officer told Birmingham Mail. But by 2003, 6 years had passed. Time had washed away potential clues. Number 4. They crossed paths with a predatory offender, possibly a serial one. Among the darker theories is the possibility that David and Patrick were victims of a predatory child abuser, someone with a history of targeting boys and experience in covering their tracks. It's a scenario that has surfaced in other child disappearance cases across the UK, especially in the 1980s and 1990s. Some have speculated whether a roaming offender could have been operating in the Midlands at the time, one who had claimed other victims and gone undetected. The death of Mark Billington, a 15-year-old found dead in Solihull in 1984, is sometimes raised in this context. Though never linked to the Spencer Warren case officially, the circumstances of his death remain unclear, and the area overlaps. The suggestion is that a serial predator could have been passing through, or even living in the area, and taken the opportunity when he saw the boys alone. These types of offenders often act on impulse but have practiced concealment strategies, which might explain the total lack of evidence. Still, without any confirmed link to another case, this theory remains highly speculative. Number 5. They were abducted and killed by Brian Lunn Field. The final theory, and the one that has attracted the most long-term attention from both police and the public, centers on one man, Brian Lunn Field. A convicted child sex offender and murderer, Field had already been jailed for the abduction and killing of a 14-year-old boy in 1968. That conviction only came decades later, in 2001, thanks to advances in DNA testing. In 2006, detectives confirmed that Field had been living near Chelmsley Wood at the time of David and Patrick's disappearance. He worked as a gardener, drove a white van, and was known to drink heavily and drive around late at night. He also had a documented history of trying to abduct boys in pairs. Police formally questioned him at Full Sutton Prison. He denied involvement. Around the same time, investigators conducted a major dig at Old Damson Lane, a plot of land Field had once used. Nothing was found. Still, for many investigators, Field remains the strongest suspect to date, though no charges have ever been brought. Even years later, fresh witness reports and community-led searches continue to revisit his potential role. But without physical evidence, the case against him remains circumstantial. After nearly 3 decades of shifting theories and unresolved grief, one scenario rises above the rest. The disappearance of David Spencer and Patrick Warren on a cold night in 1996 bears the hallmarks not of misadventure or flight, but of a targeted act committed by someone with the motive, means, and mindset to carry it out. When examining the theories, we find the most likely truth to be that the boys encountered a known predator, and the evidence, though circumstantial, overwhelmingly points to Brian Lunn Field. To understand why, it helps to eliminate what doesn't fit. The theory that David and Patrick ran away collapses under its own weight. No money, no extra clothes, no preparation. Just 2 kids stepping out for a quick visit and never coming back. Had they intended to vanish, their absence wouldn't have lasted years. It would have ended in days. Then there's the accident theory. Plausible at first glance, but weakened by time and terrain. Multiple searches were conducted across the parklands, lakes, and derelict areas around Chelmsley Wood. Not a shred of physical evidence has ever surfaced to suggest they drowned, fell, or were trapped somewhere. No blood, no clothing, no trace. What remains is the scenario that aligns with the known behavior of child predators. David and Patrick were young, but not naive. They wouldn't have walked into danger willingly, unless the danger didn't look like danger at all. Witnesses who came forward in 2021 suggested that Field may have already been speaking with the boys in the days prior to their disappearance. That kind of grooming behavior, building trust casually over time, is textbook for offenders like Field. If he'd inserted himself into their world in a way that seemed friendly or routine, they likely wouldn't have registered him as a threat. Field had a white van. He had a history of attempting to abduct boys in pairs. In 1986, he tried to snatch 2 teenagers who only escaped by jumping from his moving vehicle. He threatened them with a weapon. He told them to take off their clothes. That incident was just one of several disturbing episodes that preceded his conviction in the 1968 murder of Roy Tuttle, another schoolboy taken and killed while walking home. Field was only caught in 2001 after DNA testing linked him to that cold case. When David and Patrick vanished, Field was living within a few miles of Chelmsley Wood. He worked as a gardener, knew the area well, and had access to remote plots of land, including the site at Old Damson Lane, which he used for dumping waste. In 2006, police conducted a full-scale excavation there. Forensic archaeologists searched through layers of rubble and debris. Field, interviewed in prison under caution, denied knowing anything about the boys. Nothing was found. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And what matters is how well the known details fit him compared to any other suspect. None do. No other named person has ever emerged with a history, location, and behavioral pattern that aligns so precisely with the boy's disappearance. Field wasn't just nearby. He was exactly the kind of offender who targets kids like David and Patrick. His presence in the area wasn't vague. It was documented. His prior crimes weren't minor. They were violent and committed against boys of the same age. That's not a coincidence. It's a pattern. One local witness told the Channel 4 documentary team that he saw a man matching Field's description digging in a field behind Solihull Moors Football Club shortly after the boys went missing. He was alone. It was night. He appeared to be covering something up. The tip prompted David's younger brother, Leo Toole, to organize a civilian-led dig in 2021. Locals donated money, hired equipment, and searched the area themselves. Police urged them to stop, citing the need to preserve potential evidence. But the dig went ahead, and still nothing was found. Field never confessed. In 2024, he died in prison at the age of 87. If he did take David and Patrick, he took that knowledge with him. But the silence surrounding the case feels less like a void and more like a blueprint, a set of details that, when laid side by side, point clearly in his direction. Former Detective Graham Hill, who worked on the investigation and interviewed Field, said it plainly. You've got a man with a previous conviction for abducting children in the vicinity of where 2 boys go missing. Ultimately, that makes him a very good suspect. It's the quiet clarity of that conclusion that sticks. Not because it provides closure, there is still none, but because it fits the known world too well to ignore. The most likely thing that happened is this. David Spencer and Patrick Warren encountered Brian Lunn Field on that winter night. They may have spoken to him before. They may have trusted him. They got into his van, and they were never seen again. Do you want to bring bad things with you wherever you go? Our episodes are now available as a podcast. Look us up on your favorite podcast app and listen to the most truth-seeking true crime podcast out there.